Our next speaker is Sergio Troncoso, and I just met today, but we found that we share, if not an epidemic, an infection in common, I would guess. When I was president of ALA, I was on Talk of the Nation, and it was a call-in show, and I got a call from someone who said, if libraries are in such trouble, you know, I've been thinking about being a librarian, but I guess it's a dead profession. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I answered her, and a couple of years later I was teaching a course at Pratt Library School, and I always go around the first day and ask people why they want to be librarians. And a young woman named Lisa Fondresek, who is now the librarian at the Bank Street School where Sergio's children go, said, I heard you on the radio, and you talked me into being a librarian. So, and Sergio is our next speaker, and he's a wonderful library advocate.
Thank you. I wanted to thank the ALA and especially Carol Bray, my friend, for inviting me. I wanted to focus my few words today on what some people might consider a bottom-up approach to literacy advocacy rather than a top-down approach. And I wanted to focus on three main themes: culture, libraries, and literature. And on a sentence I have always used in any short biography about my writing. I am the son of Mexican immigrants. I say this sentence because first it is factual and explains my history and what has always mattered to me. I also say it as a matter of pride because I know the good that can come out of a neighborhood like Isleta and a city like El Paso, Texas. Finally, I will forever repeat this sentence, I am the son of Mexican immigrants, because I want to challenge what this sentence has meant stereotypically, and because I also want to challenge other Mexican Americans to rethink who they are and who they can be. When I write about culture with a capital C, I mean familia, and of course I always start with my family and my neighborhood in Isleta, since I know those the best, and I know they have imparted good lessons to me about reading, writing, and education. But mostly about character, where I think it all begins. My father and mother, Rodolfo and Berta Troncoso, both from Juarez, Mexico, came to El Paso, Texas in the 1950s as newlyweds and new American residents. They did not have any money, and they built their own adobe house in Isleta, which back then was a colonia without electricity or running water. We also had a spooky outhouse in the backyard, which overlooked an irrigation canal. We had a hard life, and I do not think my parents ever became cynical or self-defeatist. In fact, the more setbacks we had, the harder they tried, the harder they worked, and the harder they made their children work. More importantly, this is what my father and mother have accomplished. All four of their children not only graduated from college, but also have graduate degrees. And yes, my father and mother were and are Mexicanos who speak primarily Spanish. How did they accomplish this? I think the first and most important gift my parents gave us was unconditional love. But this was not, I love and justify everything you do, but I love you no matter what you do, and I expect you to do what is right. Unconditional love with the highest expectations for moral behavior, for self-respect, for being good to others. The second lesson my parents taught us was the lesson of self-discipline about your work. The love of hard work, not because you love to work, but because you love the work you do. Finally, my parents taught us that they had time for us, time to help with our projects, time and a selflessness to consider and support what we wanted to do. I remember my mother always giving me money every month to buy books from the Scholastic Book Club. I also remember my father building a 2-story cardboard house with me for a puppet show I gave one day in school. So you see, they got involved in their children's lives. They did not give up simply because they did not know the language very well. They found other ways to help. They found the time to care often about things they did not completely understand. And I have never forgotten that. These lessons from my family were the groundwork of my literacy. I cannot say it any simpler than this. To change the world, we must begin at home. So when I talk about literacy and culture, I am talking about nurturing the character in children to work hard and succeed, even in a tough environment like Isleta. These lessons are not lessons extraneous to the Mexican-American community. There existed other familias in Isleta that began with nothing but a patch of dirt, and their children became teachers, lawyers, doctors, and librarians. And of course, there were families who wasted time and lacked discipline, who succumbed to drugs or other methods of self-destruction, or who valued immediate menial work at the price of long-term education and success. But the good examples were and are right there in Isleta, within the Mexican-American community. We must never forget that and sell ourselves short. And for those who are not born into this community, we must not allow our view of Mexican Americans to be warped by the ignorance of academics like Samuel Huntington from across the Charles River at Harvard. The real challenge to academic theoreticians and government officials is to find out and honestly understand why the culture of some families allows them to take 1, 2, 20 steps forward toward a higher probability of success, and why others are left behind. As I grew up in Isleta, libraries, and particularly the main branch of the El Paso Public Library, became a focal point of my life. What is the role of libraries in encouraging children of the Mexican-American border to read and write better, and yes, to learn about themselves and their heritage? After I amassed a huge collection of comic books and adventure books, mysteries, history books, with the money my mother gave me for the Scholastic Book Club, I suddenly realized when I was 13 years old that I did not have to own a book to read it. I could get it from the library. So began a strange but wonderful odyssey to the El Paso Public Library on many Saturday mornings. My mother would make the sign of the cross over my face and chest before I jumped on my 3-speed bike, and I would start my 15-mile trip from San Lorenzo Avenue, usually before 7 in the morning, before it was too hot, and bike west, all the way one stoplight and dusty corner after another, to downtown El Paso to visit my grandmother for an afternoon in the El Paso Public Library. I nearly died a few times. Once I was racing across the street corner on Paisano and half slid underneath a bus that suddenly crossed my path. My front wheel was crushed, but the bus missed my body by a few inches. I also had other nasty scrapes and falls, but as soon as I arrived at my abuelito's house on Olive Street, Doña Dolores and Don Jose welcomed me with hot Mexican chocolate and cookies. The best part was sitting on the front porch and listening to stories about the Mexican Revolution and living in El Rancho near Chihuahua. From my abuelitas, I would bike to the main branch of the El Paso Public Library. I found books about Villa and Obregón and Zapata, stories from Mark Twain to S.E. Hinton. I first read Rodolfo Anaya at the El Paso Public Library. I found when it was too hot that I could go downstairs and read in the cool library basement, which supposedly was haunted. In retrospect, one main reason any public library is important is because it is free. It levels the playing field a bit. Even if you have no money, you can go there to explore ideas, to read about other times and cultures, to think. Yes, the El Paso Public Library gave me access to more books, but it also gave me access to a culture of sitting down quietly to read without disturbance. In the library, not only did I read more, but I read more carefully and more deeply, because I could stay there until my mind was exhausted. In many ways, those early years prepared me for the strenuous and extended concentration I would need for my studies at Harvard and Yale. I exercised my mental muscles in the library, and lo and behold, I went from a casual reader to a focused one. I am no doubt a writer today because I had a place to go as a kid where everybody also reveled in the wonder within books, the El Paso Public Library. Of course, now as a father, I have tried to instill my love of libraries and reading in my two sons, Aaron and Isaac. Every 2 weeks, my wife and I take the boys who are 7 and 10 years old to the St. Agnes branch of the New York Public Library. At home, we have attempted to nurture a culture of reading. Aaron, our 10-year-old, will routinely get up at 6 in the morning and read 2 hours before school. He finishes about 2 to 3 novels per week. Isaac, our 7-year-old, sits quietly with his favorite books about collecting rocks and shells or carefully reads science books for children. Recently, an administrator at their school in New York, the Bank Street School for Children, where Lisa's a librarian, took me aside and asked me, "How do we bottle what you are doing? How did you turn your kids into such great readers?" Here are a few lessons I have often shared with other parents. First, read to your children every day and start early when they are 1 or 2 years old. Second, at the beginning, read slowly, point to each word, and never force them to read or write if they are not ready. It is important not only that you read to your children, but how you do it. Finally, make reading and storytelling a part of your family's culture. Let me say then a few words about literature and how I hope to encourage others to make that long voyage from literacy to literature. It has been my mission to write stories about the moral character of Mexican Americans, to create literary drama from their philosophical questions, to explore fundamental human issues through the proud heritage and history that I am a part of. Why? Too often when I read Chicano or Latino literature, I would see caricatures instead of complex characters. I would read about colorful and mostly visual beings, but not about their minds, not about the serious questions of life and death that I often debated with my abuelita until midnight. Stereotypes and easily digestible images became the norm, maybe because it was too hard to go against what others thought of you, or maybe because these images were popular and even profitable. But these caricatures were not who we were. I hope my stories will present a more complete and complex picture of who we are. But I also hope that my stories will challenge people and challenge our culture. I like to challenge conventions because I want people to think and not just to accept and repeat by rote what they think is true. I want people to read my stories and discover something in common with the characters, but also something that unsettles them, something that I hope prompts them to ask and answer for themselves whether and why we should be that way. I think this perspective and philosophical attitude I take with my writing sometimes condemns me to being less popular than maybe I should be. But that's okay. Just like my abuelita, I am more interested in being right than in being liked. And I approach trying to be right not with nostalgia or dogmatism, not with ready-made, simple, and meaningless answers to tough questions, but with an open mind, stubbornness, perseverance, with complex stories, and a wave of the hand to encourage others to join me in a quest to keep exploring new worlds. Yes, I am the son of Mexican immigrants. I have never forgotten that, but nor have I taken it for granted. I know it is my responsibility to give meaning to that sentence, perhaps a new meaning that one day will become the norm. Then it will be time for another young boy or young girl from Isleta to challenge the norm and take it much further than I ever did. But I will be the first to congratulate them for making me obsolete. I will tell them that what I meant and what I wanted to do with my life reached way beyond the sons or daughters of Mexican immigrants. beyond El Paso and beyond America. What I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it reached for the best in what a human being could be. I was simply trying to be true to the best part of myself. Thank you.